In the endless sea of Tinder profiles, Simon Leviev stood out like royalty among peasants. His photos weren't the blurry snapshots you see on most dating apps. No, his profile was a portfolio carefully curated, almost cinematic. There he was, standing in front of a sleek private jet, wearing a designer suit that looked like it came straight off a Milan runway. Another photo showed him on the deck of a yacht, champagne bottle in one hand, the sun setting behind the horizon. And then another smiling casually in a five-star hotel lobby, as if luxury were as natural to him as breathing. To women scrolling through Tinder, Simon wasn't just attractive, he was the embodiment of the life they dreamed of: wealth, charm, mystery, and a promise of adventure. When Cecilia Fjellhøy swiped right, it was the beginning of what she believed was her modern-day fairy tale. Cecilia was a 29-year-old Norwegian graduate student, living in London, intelligent, ambitious, but secretly yearning for a love story that felt larger than life, and Simon gave her just that. The first messages came quickly, smooth, attentive, and relentless. He didn't play games. He didn't wait hours to reply. He made her feel like she was already important. Within days, he asked her to meet, but not for coffee, not for dinner. For Cecilia, their first date was something out of a movie, a private jet flight to Bulgaria. Imagine swiping right and days later finding yourself stepping into a luxury car, escorted to a private runway, your heart pounding as a billionaire in waiting ushers you onto his jet. That's what Cecilia experienced. The plane was stocked with champagne, the staff greeted her by name, and Simon, so effortlessly confident, spoke about his life as the son of a wealthy Israeli diamond tycoon. As the jet soared into the skies, Cecilia felt as if she were ascending into a new life, a life of glamour, romance, and excitement. Life she never thought she'd have. And Simon didn't just shower her with luxury, he showered her with attention. Messages, calls, photos, promises. His words came like poetry about family, future, and forever. He painted himself not as a playboy, but as a man searching for his soulmate. But what Cecilia couldn't see, what no one could see at the time, was that every glass of champagne, every private flight, every extravagant gift was paid for with money stolen from another woman. Simon Leviev wasn't just looking for love. He was running one of the most audacious romance scams the world had ever seen. Cecilia's first trip with Simon felt like something out of a Hollywood romance film. But what she didn't know was that this dream date was the first act in a carefully rehearsed performance. Simon's greatest trick wasn't just showing wealth. It was making women feel like they belonged in his world. Every detail was calculated: the flowers waiting at the hotel, the luxury cars that seemed to appear out of thin air, the way the staff treated him like royalty. When Cecilia joined him in Bulgaria, she found herself swept into a circle of extravagance. 5-star hotels with infinity pools, candlelit dinners overlooking city skylines, champagne bottles, popped not for birthdays or anniversaries, but simply because it was Tuesday, and Simon's charm was relentless. He listened intently, complimented generously, and always spoke about the future. He didn't just want to date Cecilia. He told her he wanted to marry her, have children, build a life together. In the glow of candlelight and the thrill of luxury, Cecilia began to believe it, but she wasn't the only one. Simon ran the same script with women across Europe: Oslo, London, Stockholm, Athens. His photos and messages pulled them in. His jet-setting lifestyle sealed the illusion, and every woman who boarded a plane with him believed she was the one. In reality, Simon was running a carousel of victims. One woman's dream date was paid for by another's drained bank account. It was a constant cycle: borrow the illusion of wealth from one victim and use it to seduce the next, and he played his part perfectly. He spoke of danger, mysterious enemies who supposedly targeted him because of his diamond business. He spoke of loyalty, asking his new girlfriends if they would stand by him when things got tough. And above all, he spoke of trust, because to Simon, trust was the most valuable currency. Cecilia wasn't blind. A part of her wondered, how could someone so wealthy have time for Tinder? But each doubt was erased with another extravagant gesture. When you're flown across borders, when hotel staff know your name, when you're promised a life of romance and diamonds, suspicion feels almost silly. And that's how Simon Leviev pulled women deeper into his web. To them, he wasn't a swindler. He was the prince they had been waiting for. Cecilia was living a fantasy. The man she met on Tinder wasn't just attentive, he was overwhelming. Messages poured in from Simon at all hours of the day. I miss you, I'm thinking about you, I can't wait for our future together. His affection was constant, intoxicating, and carefully designed to bind her emotionally. But Simon didn't stop there. He knew how to amplify the illusion. Just days into their relationship, he invited Cecilia on a private jet to Bulgaria for a weekend getaway. For Cecilia, the invitation was both thrilling and terrifying. Who casually flies someone to another country within a week of meeting? But Simon made it sound natural, effortless, just another day in his billionaire lifestyle. When she stepped onto the jet, her doubts melted away. The cabin was luxurious, stocked with champagne, fruits, and plush leather seats. His bodyguard, always looming nearby, reinforced the image of a man constantly under threat, a man too important to live like everyone else. Cecilia returned from that trip, completely convinced she had found the one. What she didn't know was that Simon had pulled this exact stunt with dozens of women before her. Each lavish dinner, each flight, each luxury detail was funded not by his own fortune, but by the money he had already stolen from previous victims. This was Simon's genius. He turned the wealth of one victim into bait for the next, a never-ending carousel of deceit, spinning faster with every new woman who fell under his spell. And Cecilia was now firmly strapped in for the ride. By now, Cecilia was completely swept off her feet. Simon didn't just shower her with affection. He overwhelmed her with constant proof of his love. Lavish bouquets arrived at her apartment. Romantic texts poured in, sometimes dozens in a single hour. His calls came during meetings, late at night, first thing in the morning. It was intoxicating, the kind of attention people dream about, but rarely experience. But behind the glamour, Simon was strategically love-bombing her, a psychological tactic designed to hook a victim emotionally before the manipulation begins. Cecilia, like many others before her, mistook this intensity for passion rather than control. The romance escalated at lightning speed. Within weeks, Simon was talking about moving in together, about a shared future filled with luxury and love. He spoke about marriage, children, and building a life together. For Cecilia, it was a dream unfolding too fast, but who questions destiny when it comes wrapped in diamonds and jet fuel? Still, there were moments, small cracks where doubt flickered. Simon was often too busy with mysterious meetings. His phone calls sometimes ended abruptly, and there were whispers of danger. The bodyguard, Peter, was always close, silent, and imposing. Simon explained it all with stories of powerful enemies, dangerous rivals, and the constant threat of violence that came with being the son of a diamond tycoon. Cecilia didn't know it, but Simon had perfected the script. The whirlwind romance wasn't unique to her. It was a recycled playbook he used on women across Europe. Each woman believed she was his only love, while in reality, they were just characters in his con, bankrolling the illusion for the next victim, and soon, the perfect dream would twist into a nightmare. Because Simon Leviev was preparing to play his next card, one that turned love into leverage and romance into raw financial control. One evening, Cecilia's phone lit up with a message that made her heart drop. A photograph of Simon's bodyguard, Peter, slumped in the back seat of a luxury car, blood on his shirt, glass shattered around him. Simon followed with frantic voice notes. His enemies had found them. They'd been attacked, and his life was in danger. To Cecilia, this was terrifying proof of the world Simon had warned her about. The stories of rival diamond dealers, powerful enemies, and the constant threat of violence suddenly felt real. Simon insisted he was fine, but he couldn't access his bank accounts. His enemies were tracking his transactions, making it unsafe to use his own cards. He needed help. He needed Cecilia. The request was subtle at first. "Can you book me a hotel room with your card?" But soon it escalated. "I need you to send me money. Just for a few days, I'll wire it back immediately. You know I'm good for it." Cecilia hesitated. She wasn't wealthy, but she was in love, deeply invested in their future. To refuse would be to abandon him in his moment of need. And hadn't he proven his love? The private jets, the endless attention, the promises of forever? so she agreed. At first, it was a few thousand, then tens of thousands. Credit cards, loans, even secret lines of credit Simon guided her to open. Each payment came with reassurances. I'll pay you back tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Simon's greatest weapon wasn't violence. It was persuasion. He didn't steal by force. He made his victims hand him their money willingly, convinced they were saving the man they loved. And by the time Cecilia realized what was happening, she was already drowning in debt. Cecilia's life was no longer her own. Every waking moment revolved around Simon's urgent requests, frantic calls, and desperate promises. He told her his enemies were tracking him, forcing him to switch hotels, countries, and even phones. Each move required more cash. Each step deeper into this nightmare pulled Cecilia further under. She maxed out her credit cards, then applied for new ones. When that wasn't enough, Simon coached her through securing massive personal loans. He spoke with such confidence, promising repayment within days, that even bankers seemed convinced. "I'll send you the wire first thing in the morning, baby," he'd say, his voice dripping with reassurance. But morning always came with another excuse. At first, Cecilia believed these were temporary sacrifices, small hurdles before the life of luxury Simon had promised. But soon, the numbers grew staggering. 30,000, 50,000, 100,000. She wasn't just helping a boyfriend anymore. She was betting her entire future on a man who existed entirely in the shadows. And yet, Simon maintained the illusion of love. Between demands for money, he still flooded her with affectionate texts, photos of them together, promises of their dream wedding, and children. It was the cruelest kind of manipulation, giving just enough warmth to keep her hope alive, while draining her bank account dry. For Cecilia, sleep became impossible. Debt collectors called, interest piled up, and the weight of her choices grew unbearable. But whenever she thought about pulling away, Simon reminded her, "I'm in danger, baby. If you love me, you'll help me." It was a line Cecilia couldn't resist. And with every yes, she slipped further into a financial black hole Simon had dug perfectly, precisely, and deliberately. At first, Cecilia brushed away doubts Simon was always convincing, always quick with explanations that smoothed over her fears. But cracks were beginning to show. The first red flag came when Simon's repayments never actually arrived. He sent her screenshots of supposed bank transfers, documents showing huge sums wired directly to her accounts. But days passed and nothing cleared. When she questioned him, he claimed international banks were delaying the process because of the enemies watching him. His confidence was unshakable, and Cecilia, desperate to believe, accepted the excuse. Then there were the inconsistencies. Simon claimed to be traveling constantly, yet sometimes his Instagram showed him in places that didn't quite match his story. The timing of his messages was strange, as if he was juggling multiple conversations at once. He always seemed to be online, but rarely available for long calls. Still, Cecilia clung to the fantasy. Love can blind even the smartest people, and Simon knew exactly how to exploit that. He sprinkled in just enough romance, voice notes, selfies, promises of their future together to keep her hooked, while pressing harder for more loans and more credit cards. Meanwhile, Cecilia's real world was collapsing. Bills mounted, collectors called nonstop, and friends noticed her stress, but how could she explain? How could she admit that she was secretly funding the life of a supposed billionaire? The shame kept her silent, and Simon thrived in that silence. But Cecilia's doubts were growing louder. Deep down, she felt something wasn't right. The question was no longer if Simon was lying, it was how deep the lies truly went. Cecilia's world was unraveling. The weight of her debt was crushing her, and Simon's demands were only increasing. Each new loan, each new credit card, each desperate financial maneuver pushed her deeper into a hole she couldn't escape. Simon, however, seemed unfazed. He continued living lavishly: private jets, luxury hotels, fine dining. He sent her photos of his glamorous life, even as she struggled to afford her rent. The contradiction gnawed at her. How could a billionaire be so broke? Why did he always need her money, yet flaunt his wealth so publicly? Her breaking point came one night when Simon called in a panic, demanding another $25,000 immediately. Cecilia, drained and drowning, told him she simply couldn't. For the first time, she resisted, and in that moment Simon's mask slipped, his tone turned cold, his words sharp. Instead of romance, he used guilt. "If you don't help me, baby, they'll kill me. After everything we've shared, after all my love, you're abandoning me." The manipulation cut deep. Cecilia felt torn between survival and loyalty. But something inside her was changing, the fear, the shame, the exhaustion. It was eroding the fantasy he had built. She started searching online, trying to piece together Simon's story. She reached out to friends, cautiously hinting at her situation. And slowly, the truth began to emerge. Stories, names, patterns that matched her experience. Simon Leviev wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't the son of a diamond billionaire. He wasn't a victim of enemies. He was a predator, running the same scam across Europe, leaving a trail of broken women and mountains of debt in his wake. For Cecilia, the illusion was shattered, but shattering an illusion was one thing. Escaping it was another. Cecilia had reached her limit. The debt was unbearable, the lies were unraveling, and Simon's manipulation was losing its grip. She decided it was time to fight back. She contacted a group of investigative journalists, sharing her story in detail. At first, she was terrified. What if Simon found out? What if he retaliated? But the journalists had already been tracking his trail across Europe. Cecilia's evidence, the messages, voice notes, receipts, and fake bank transfers fit perfectly into a puzzle that stretched far beyond her. Together, they began piecing Simon's empire apart. Each victim told a similar story. Love bombing, luxury, staged danger, then the inevitable financial emergency. The journalists discovered that Simon Leviev wasn't even his real name. He was Shimon Hayut, a convicted fraudster from Israel who had escaped prison and reinvented himself on Tinder. The evidence was overwhelming, and Cecilia finally felt the weight of truth on her side. For months she had carried her shame alone, afraid no one would understand. Now she realized she wasn't alone at all. There were countless other women who had fallen into the same trap. But Simon was still out there, flying across countries, living large on the money he had stolen. If the world was going to stop him, Cecilia had to make her story public. It was a terrifying decision, but a necessary one. The hunter had to become the hunted, and Cecilia was ready to expose the swindler who had almost destroyed her life. The journalists published their investigation, and Cecilia's story exploded across headlines. The world was stunned. Women everywhere recognized the pattern. The promises, the emergencies, the debts. One by one, more victims came forward, each with stories eerily similar to Cecilia's. Simon Leviev, the so-called Diamond Prince, was unmasked as Shimon Hayut, a serial fraudster who had scammed women across Europe out of millions. The luxury lifestyle he flaunted so boldly on Instagram had been built entirely on lies and stolen money. But Simon wasn't easy to catch. Even as the story spread, he continued living lavishly, jet-setting across countries, convinced he was untouchable. He mocked his victims online, posting photos of expensive meals, fast cars, and new watches, as though daring the world to stop him. It wasn't until 2018, at Athens International Airport, that authorities finally arrested him. After years of deceit, Simon's empire of lies crumbled. He was sentenced in Israel, not for the millions he had stolen, but for smaller fraud charges. Incredibly, he served only 5 months behind bars. Yet, while justice seemed incomplete, Simon's reputation was destroyed. His face became synonymous with online deception, his name forever tied to one of the most infamous scams of the digital age. For Cecilia and the other women, the scars, financial and emotional, remained. But by telling their stories, they had taken back their power. The Tinder Swindler may have walked free far too soon, but his mask was gone forever. And for the countless people who saw their story, the warning was clear. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't lurk in dark alleys. It sits right across from you at a candlelit dinner table.